I dedicate this message today to the Reverend Ed Garris. Ed is very ill. In fact, he's been unresponsive for several days. More will be shared during our prayers of the people about Ed, who, with his wife Ev, have been regulars in our Zoom worship now for about 4 years. But for now, I dedicate this message to him because deep down, he might have a sense of where he is that none of us knows right now. And the message is indeed a sense of where we are. In a classic New York feature from 1965, a celebrated nonfiction writer, John McPhee, presented a long piece on a man named Bill Bradley. At the time, Bradley was an All-American basketball player at Princeton, and he had just been named to be a Rhodes Scholar. Bradley went on to professional basketball stardom, then served 3 terms as a U.S. Senator from New Jersey, and some of you may recall he was a prominent presidential candidate in the year 2000. An All-American, a Rhodes Scholar, a U.S. Senator and presidential candidate, Bill Bradley seemed to have it all. From his article, McPhee's article, here's a sliver of his conversation with the schoolboy Bradley while standing together on a basketball court. I asked him what he called his over-the-shoulder shot. He said that it is a much simpler shot than it appears to be. And to illustrate, he tossed the ball over his shoulder and into the basket while he was talking to me and staring me in the eye. I retrieved the ball and I handed it back to him. And he said, when you have played basketball for a while, and you don't need to look at the basket when you are close in like this. He said this, throwing it over his shoulder again and right through the hoop. You develop a sense of where you are. A sense of where you are. We are. That became the title of McPhee's unforgettable piece, A Sense of Where You Are. Now, unlike Bradley, of course, the Magi were not close to their goal when they set off for Jerusalem. But in every episode, did you notice in every episode of this familiar narrative today, these Magi always seem to have a sense, at least, of where they were. Following the rising light, they sense that the King of Jews must be near Jerusalem. And so they go to the right place for consultation where Herod could consult his scribes so they could pinpoint the birth at Bethlehem. The star then reappears for them, then it stops so they can find Jesus. And then the dream, leave by another road. Herod had tipped them off, and now they are tipped off about Herod. So, go to Jerusalem. Go to Bethlehem. Find Jesus in Bethlehem. Return safely home. Brazen and far-flung sojourners though they may be, at every juncture of this story, the Magi seem to have a sense of where they are. A sense of where we are. I was seeking this sense a quarter of a century past, preparing to leave my first pastorate for my second. I was delighted by an interest that the church in Ann Arbor, Michigan was showing me. Me, a small town Oklahoma parson in a real small town of Oklahoma. I mean small. Everything, though, about this Michigan church over 1,000 miles away seemed aflame for me with the light of Epiphany. For one, it was a more light church, as LGBTQ plus inclusive congregations were called then. It was one of about 100 more light congregations at that time, representing less than 1% of all congregations in our denomination. But I felt little more bound to its mission than to the Presbyterian Church as an institution, for its sense of inclusivity was not included by the polity at that time, the official church polity. But it was for this congregation. And it seemed more to me bound to the principles of Jesus than to the powers of Jerusalem. So I was getting excited. I was beginning to gather a sense of where I was going. And yet, as I prepared to say yes to this Ann Arbor church's pioneering call, it did not escape me how small this church was. And I began to wonder, was there some systemic dysfunction I was missing? Was its pastor nominating committee being dishonest with me? Was it at least dissembling? So I took my dilemma to the executive presbyter of churches in that area, a man by the name of the Reverend Ed Garris. Over the phone, I said to our friend Ed, "This church seems wonderful. Its mission is dynamic. What keeps it so small?" Ed's response was immediate. Location, location, location. Indeed, Northside Presbyterian Church in Ann Arbor, Michigan, had and still has an issue with location. It is situated off a side road that was once a main road, and then down a long driveway from that road into a wooded area. Ed's words back in 1998 to me, location, 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 were an epiphany gift. It grounded me in that church's physical reality and gave me a sense of where I would be. It would be a particular out-of-the-way location, a Bethlehem for me to accept as is and to go from there. Now, we at Bethesda Presbyterian are a similar size faith community, particularly this morning, to the one in Ann Arbor. And while we may suffer through a location issue when it comes to, say, parking, we do not suffer a location issue anymore in our visibility in the community. For over the last decade, more visible each year it seems, we at BPC have gained and are gaining a new sense of where we are. When the Delray Club moved in next door in 2012, and then the farmers market next door 2 years later, our leadership was gravely concerned, and rightly so, about the consequent lack of parking for our still suburban congregation. But now, as our congregation, I notice, has been slowly morphing from suburban into urban, where perhaps as many walk in as they drive in many days, the issue is much less about parking for our church and much more where we park ourselves as a church. And here's our epiphany gift, I believe. Where we park ourselves as a church today is as a church wholly in and with and for the community around us. Searching like the magi, at the same time having a sense of where we are. For example, tomorrow in our church house next door, a 2-week, $18,000 renovation funded by our capital campaign will commence, beginning tomorrow. This following a $10,000 roofing a few months ago. This $18,000 interior renovation will include an extensive first floor rebuild for the purpose of providing space for the community around us. Not space for us, our administration, our meetings, our fellowship, but space dedicated to the use of our community around us, uses our session, our church board, will approve. It all begins tomorrow, and they're hoping to end it by the end of the month. And so together with Del Rey's extensive spiritual recovery of 100 alcoholics and addicts and codependents daily embedded on our campus, and together with the Here to Help grocery ministry below us, feeding dozens of families every Sunday embedded on our campus, and together with our weekend sanctuary vigil open to all in the community for nearly 2 years now, and our complimentary farmers market water, which will resume in the spring, there, and there, the church house will be the fifth there, providing a sense of where we are. Here, 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 here. Changing our location from Sunday morning here to these 5 places of there. It's taken a bit of a journey to get there 5 times over, to provide us all a sense of where we are in our community. I believe how we as a church respond to a single question is determinative of our well-being and faithfulness as a congregation. And that one question is this: if this church disappeared tomorrow, what would our community be missing? If this church disappeared tomorrow, what would our community be missing? Sunday morning, indeed. Beautiful music, indeed. The Montessori school, indeed. And now a whole lot more. A whole lot more. For we now have, more than ever, much like the magi in relationship to our surrounding world, we have now more than ever our night into light Epiphany journey, giving us a sense of where we are. And so as our humble craft sets sail, ready to set sail into the new year and into our 4th century as church, let us be led by God's light among us as we join the magi in bringing gifts to the vulnerable as they are lit before us. Gifts to Jesus, gifts to the vulnerable through the light of new birth. Here to be found and still yet to come. Thanks be to God. Amen.